Hi, this is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to another CentreCourt session on careers. We have the careers people from four great schools, Chicago Booth, Georgetown, Minnesota Carlson, and Cornell Johnson. Welcome all. You can see their names, Stephanie, Eric, Maggie, and David. They come with varying degrees of interesting experience. David at Cornell spent a lot of time in banking, last of which before he went to Cornell was with the Royal Bank of Canada, and before that with JP Morgan Chase in leveraged finance. Eric had a long career in HR with Accenture, 20 years according to his LinkedIn profile. Stephanie used to work as a consultant at BCG in strategy, and when it was Booze, before it changed its name. And Maggie's been a coach for quite some time and has coached a lot of people through their careers. So welcome everybody. So right now everyone knows we are in a pandemic-induced recession. The full force of that recession is not yet entirely apparent. And I say that only because there's always a lag in reporting, and you're now starting to see some bankruptcies. J. Crew, Gold Gym, Norwegian Cruise Lines just announced that they're pondering bankruptcy. And I think that when the full effect of that happens, when there's more bad news and it hurts consumer confidence, we'll see a deeper impact of it. But in terms of the upcoming MBA job market, it's holding pretty good. Stephanie, want to talk about where we are right now for both first-year MBAs looking forward to summer internships, as well as the latest crop of graduates about to spill out?
Of course, yeah. And John, thank you for having all of us. Really wonderful to talk
Our
with this.
pleasure.
As we look at what's going on with internships, there are some things that are not particularly surprising. One is that many of our employers have moved to virtual internship models, but by and large, they're honoring their internship commitments. Our corporate partners have been very clear that they really value MBA talent, and I think there's a lot going for our MBA knowledge workers, because these companies really do want to find ways to make it possible for them to contribute over the summer, as well as to really experience what these firms are like. As I look at our full-time students, they've really been experiencing a very positive set of support. Companies want them to arrive. By and large, they're hoping to onboard them in person. With some of the softening of the economy, we are seeing start dates get pushed out. But to this point, we've not seen major rescinded offers at our companies. We're continuing to monitor the situation and anticipate there might be changes, especially for some of the companies that are distressed like you've described. But overall, it's much brighter than I had anticipated given the current climate.
Yeah. David, is it the same picture over at Cornell?
Yeah. I mean, basically, very similar to what Stephanie mentioned. I mean, I think we've been very fortunate so far, at least, that companies are honoring their commitments. They're being good partners, even when they've had to shorten the internship experience. Most of them are trying to create a good virtual experience for interns. So I would say, we've been, again, very similar to Chicago Booth, very pleasantly surprised with how our corporate partners have responded so far.
That's great. And Eric, you're in a slightly different market in Washington, D.C., and I often say that geography is destiny. That's less true today, probably, because there's been such a sort of path to the West Coast, given the dynamic economy in the Bay Area in more recent years. But what's it look like in DC, where Amazon is about to open up a massive facility, right?
Right. Amazon's HQ2 will be right outside of the district in Arlington, Virginia. And they have, over 500 postings for, headquarter corporate roles in their Arlington location, even more up in New York. So the East Coast is growing in tech. We won't probably ever be Silicon Valley, but we're holding our own out here. And the good news is that even this week, I have students interviewing and getting offers both for internships and post-MBA roles. So there is some activity out there, and that probably just speaks to the credibility of the MBA credential.
Yeah, exactly. And Maggie, the companies in Minneapolis and St. Paul have long been known for their very progressive HR policies. When I was writing the book with Jack Welch years ago, he would jokingly refer to the companies in your area as communist companies. But of course, he was, a hard and true capitalist. How's it been in your neck of the woods in terms of opportunities for MBAs right now?
Yeah, much of the same as what we're hearing. A few rescinds on internships, but very small, and surprisingly so, frankly. We've all been pleasantly surprised. One of the things about the Minneapolis-St. Paul area is there's such a diversity of industries. And so we've been fortunate in that that diversity has lent itself well to students, that there's still plenty of opportunities. Lots of, not only is big tech hiring, but food manufacturers, agriculture, those industries are booming, and we have that here. So we've been pleasantly surprised that, kind of like what Eric was saying, we have students that are receiving job offers, full-time and internships just this week, which is good news. And also one of the things that I think has been great about this too is we've also been able to match students to really interesting startup and nonprofit opportunities as well. Some of the students are wanting to supplement their internship experience because they're shortened with other types of opportunities, and there's a plethora of those. So we've been pleased at how we've been able to sort of help our students look at the summer as a sort of a portfolio of experiences.
Is it too early to tell what the schedules are going to look like for info sessions and trips by companies to campus in the new fall? Is that way too early right now, or are we seeing any softness as a result of the uncertainty on whether or not we'll even have physical classrooms or virtual classrooms? David, do you see any change or swing in that?
I think we'll see, some continuation of the virtual experience. So I think a few companies are indicating that they may not want to be traveling in the fall, but I would say, we're in the middle of our booking in for fall semester, for briefings and for interviews for next year. And, we haven't had anyone signal that they aren't planning to either be on campus or be virtual. So I think the only shift that we're seeing as of now is, just the continuation of this sort of virtual world that we're all, experiencing today.
Right. And a lot of recruiting has gone virtual. I think wasn't Goldman Sachs the first one to really go full out virtual, and Amazon is doing it, and a whole bunch.
Yeah, so we've gotten some experience with a few companies that started it, particularly on the tech side. So I think, as those companies have gotten used to it, and now we've all just gotten used to Zoom and, many other platforms that, maybe some of us were more hesitant to use in the past. I think now that everyone's gotten comfortable with it, it's much easier to just sort of continue on, or just say, we'll do our interview schedule virtually this year, as opposed to having to visit, 15 campuses.
Right. Stephanie, do you see more virtual interviewing, at least at the first round?
Yeah, the way that our recruiters have been thinking about it is that regardless of what the format is that we all return to school, they're going to want to engage with our students. And so we've seen strong booking requests, which is what we call companies' requests for interviews and for corporate presentations and meetings with our students. What's been really interesting is just yesterday we were speaking with a consulting firm that said the really beautiful thing about us getting comfortable with virtual is that we now have the ability for many, many other offices outside of the Midwest to engage with your students. And they were really, really enthusiastic about giving students broader exposure, whereas historically they had all adopted these really heavy in-person models. And I personally am very excited about that transition as well, because I think it'll make better use of students' time and allow them to be more focused on their engagement.
Yeah. Someone was telling me earlier today that Amazon now has an assessment test that they give to potential candidates before they will actually interview them. Is that right? What are they looking for in the assessment test? Maggie?
I mean, Amazon's always looking for students that match their leadership principles. So, that is always, they're always looking for that through the assessment and through their interview process. And so the assessment is sort of the first round. It looks different for an MBA versus a specialty master's, but that's usually at the core of what they're getting at.
Huh. And Eric, are there other companies that do that now or not?
There are different forms for that first round. Sometimes you might be asked to submit a video or a video interview where there's a prompt and you have 10 seconds to think of your answer and then deliver it.
It's like MBA admissions.
And then the beauty for the employer there is that they have a file now that they can send out to 10 different hiring managers and they can all start, fighting over the great candidates. So sometimes there's that. Sometimes there's a case that is delivered at a certain time and you've got an hour to then send something back, and that's the first assessment. So we've seen this increase, I think, over the last couple of years and probably more to come.
Stephanie, bring us through your interventions with an MBA admit at Chicago booth. When you intervene, how? What are you trying to achieve before they reach campus? And then when they finally reach campus, what are your contact points?
Yeah, thank you. So as we engage with these students and our incoming students, every summer, our career coaching team, in conjunction with the folks that are very employer-facing, create a series of modules for these incoming students to provide a lot of education on different industries. I think one of the most exciting things about pursuing an MBA is that there's so many choices. One of the hardest things is if you wait for that education until you start arriving on campus or networking with your peers, you don't have time to process everything. And so we make those educational materials available to students, as well as series of self-assessments and other tools for their preparation. And then as they arrive on campus, they begin meeting with our career coaches, with our career advisors, who are a cadre of second-year students who really play a career mentoring role for these individuals. And we have a series of educational programming that goes throughout the fall. I don't want to take up a ton of airtime, but I imagine it's quite similar across all of the schools. A combination of networking and preparation and strategy development, and then research on companies, all the way through to interview preparation and execution.
And I'm assuming that David, it's similar to Cornell, right?
Yeah, we've already started some of our webinars for incoming students in terms of, again, sort of similar to what Stephanie said, sort of educating them on different career paths and in different industries, because, for many, things just happen so fast once you arrive on campus, it's hard to wait. We give students access to some resume building programs to get their resumes in shape. And then when they arrive on campus, very similar, they'll meet with one or more career advisors, depending on if they know what they want to do or they're undecided. We allow people to meet with as many people as they want to. And then they get assigned to career work groups where they work with their peers and second-year leaders.
What separates someone who's successful, who gets exactly what he or she wants, versus someone who gets something that they have to settle for? Eric? Oh, go ahead, David.
No, that's...
I think it's knowing yourself. I think it's the student having a point of view about what their talents are, what their passions are, what they're good at and what they're not good at, and honing and shaping that into, okay, an imagination of what can I do with this? Right. There's a huge mindset when you do arrive on campus. It's a bit of a herd mentality where you've got, a third of the class chasing Wall Street and a third of the class chasing consulting. And you feel like you got to get on one of these ships or you're going to be left behind. And so, I would recommend coming in with a point of view. You don't have to have it all figured out, but have some direction and a self-knowledge of who you are and what you're all about. And then you can start exploring. You may have to jump on one of those ships, but then keep some other options open, versus simply not really knowing. And then, I guess I better go in this direction, or I guess I better follow that, or someone else is doing this. And then you're just chasing the crowd as opposed to swimming against the stream to find your own heart.
Right. And David, you were about to answer that.
I think I also say to a lot of students too, I think it depends on how much you want it. I mean, I think students that go to any of our schools are all very smart and all very capable, but how much you want something will often, and this sort of piggybacks on what Eric was saying, how much you want something often will drive the amount of commitment you have, the story you tell, the networking you'll do and how you will be presenting yourself. So I think that that's a big factor.
Right. Maggie, what in your mind separates those who get exactly what they want and dream about and those who fall a little short?
I mean, both everything that Eric and David said, I agree with. I think that knowing yourself piece is huge, and being confident to trust what you want, right? And not one of our coaches always says, not should all over yourself, right? Like, do what you actually want to do. But I think the other factor too is drivers. You know, people are really successful if they're going to drive what they want, and that what they want might be something very traditional, but they still need to have that drive to put in all the practice for the case interviewing, to network throughout the fall, but then they also have to have you know, the drive if it's networking in some unusual industry. You know, they're not the students that come to the Career Center asking, you know, for us to make the whole thing happen. They're the people that really work and partner with us and work just as hard as we do. So they have to have that drive.
Yeah. And a few of you have referred to the herd mentality. And I guess it's a true phenomena, right? I mean, you see people, a lot of people who are, you know, lined up at McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Deloitte, and the rest of them. And they see their classmates do that, and they think, well, if it's good enough for my friend, it must be good enough for me. How do you make sure that, you know, their choices are the right choices for them? Stephanie?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most challenging things, especially as we all take ourselves back to our 20s. How often did we take advice from our parents? But
Exactly.
As I reflect on the time that I spent in consulting, I realized very much that each consulting firm has a unique personality. And I think that's the case for all of the companies and all of the industries that we work with. And really helping students think about the why. Why is this firm a place where I can be successful? Why is this career, this path, something that I can get excited about? And why is it right for me? And really bringing it back to them and helping them talk through the fit for them, because longer term over their career, being in a place that is a fit is more likely to lead to long-term success. Right,
exactly. What are some of the common questions that applicants have about career services? I'm assuming that their expectations are extraordinarily high. What do you often ask by people who may come to campus to visit, and they're really thinking about coming to your campus for their MBA program? What are the most common questions you hear, David?
I think often it'll start with, you know, starts generally with very specific questions. I mean, a lot of students I think have, or applicants have, ideal companies in mind. So they have sort of the dream company as they're applying to a business school. And so they'll say, like, you know, does firm X, you know, come to campus? How many interns did they have? You know, what does it take to be successful there? And then I think it also then gets down to, then I think they start to step back and say, like, what should I be doing now? So I think, you know, the conversation is the very specific of, I want the data on how good your program is in placing people, to then, like, okay, I have, you know, in 6, 9 months, a year from now, I'm going to be in this spot. You know, what should I be doing, and how do I position myself even today to eventually, you know, to get a seat at my dream job?
Interesting. So even before they become an MBA, they're asking MBA-like specific questions.
Yeah.
That means you're good consumers, I guess, right? I mean, you know,
they're buying a product. I mean, you're buying a product, right? So, you know, you want to get some data on it, do some research. And I encourage people to do it. I mean, I encourage people to do the research so that, you know, you want to end up at the program that's best for you. So, you know, I encourage people to dig around.
What have trends surfaced in this part of the business? In other words, in the last 5 years, have you seen interest or passions among graduates change in terms of their job references? Maggie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we can all say that product management is the fastest growing. You know, a lot of our students want that. They want this intersection between the technology and the people making it, as well as, you know, the customer. So that's just the hottest growing, I think, job title for many of us. The other big trend that we've talked a lot about, and, you know, you write a lot about, but it is working in the entrepreneurial environment. It's working in a startup. It's really making something happen from the ground up. Students want impact. And so they want to see that their work day in and day out meant something and was directly correlated to the results. And that lends itself to startups and entrepreneurship. So that is another big trend that we see year over year. And it's interesting because there are students that come in fully committed to this path. And then sometimes, you know, as Eric was mentioning, that herd mentality, sometimes it's hard for them to stay true to that path because it feels easier and safer to pick maybe a more traditional route. So that's always the work of our office, to make sure that they are picking that path that's really what they want to do, that's going to make them the happiest alumni.
Yeah. And of course, product management is the most common, or one of the most common titles that technology firms have for MBAs and entry jobs. Stephanie, from your perspective, what changes have you seen?
Yeah, some of the points that Maggie has illustrated are very consistent here at Booth as well. We've also seen additional niche industries gaining a lot of momentum. One is innovation and design. So this idea of how do you apply design principles to make successful businesses, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm and energy there. In addition, healthcare, not just because of the recent crisis, but more broadly, we see more student enthusiasm around healthcare. And a bit like some of the more specialized careers, I think students often transition into more mainstream careers when they begin to follow the herd, rather than staying focused on a particular industry that they found energizing.
Right. Eric?
And then beyond that, we see a geographic dispersion in a way that we haven't in the past.
With people going west.
Child Zoom bomber, so I'm going to go on mute.
Hi there. So I was going to ask you, Eric, and now I've lost my train of thought, having seen your child there, Stephanie. It's okay. I love that.
Well, I can comment if you want a little bit on just, you know, we've seen at Georgetown some similar trends with, you know, tech has become our third most popular industry, replacing what was traditionally, you know, consumer products and the brand manager role. So we still have people going after brand, but then more people wanting to go, you know, over on the product manager side. And then there's a beautiful symbiotic relationship between, I think, entrepreneurship and tech, because a lot of these startups are tech focused and tech based. And then that broadens that ecosystem into how do you finance some of these startups and tech companies. And that's really got a spotlight on us with venture capital. So we've started a program with like an apprenticeship program for people who want to get into venture capital. So there's some cool stuff in all of this innovative space where just, you know, the whole ecosystem to support entrepreneurship on different places.
Eric, why do so many MBAs want to be consultants?
Well, you know, I think there are a number of things. I think it's a beautiful, well-rounded, all-purpose role for the degree. So I think there's a beautiful, you know, this is the sort of the master thesis project of an MBA, is to go be dropped into a client or a problem or an employer or a situation and figure something out and deliver some value and some results. So I think that's the attractiveness. It calls on your communication skills and your critical thinking skills and your relational skills and the whole package. It compensates well. There's a very clear path to partner. You know, and so that's, I think, very attractive, and I think it's a beautiful role for the degree. It's not the only one, but I think it's a good one. Yeah,
I agree. Stephanie, why did you go into consulting after you graduated from Booth with your MBA? Back in 2004, right?
2004, indeed. I actually started business school focused on going into healthcare, and I spent a summer working in strategic marketing at a pharmaceutical company. And that was after 5 years in the chemical industry. And I thought, well, I really want to move from an industry that is not particularly helpful to the planet to one that has huge implications for people's well-being. And I observed that being deep in a corporation was not quite a great fit for me, simply because I didn't find that I could have a great impact immediately. And some of the same problems in a big chemical company are no different than some of the big problems in any other big company. But the people that were doing pretty interesting work around the firm were consulting firms. The industry has changed tremendously since then, but for me, it turned out to be a tremendous extension of my MBA and a great learning experience. But many of my peers spent only a few years in that and then went on to their own entrepreneurial ventures, pursued very, very different paths. So it's certainly one path, but as Eric said, not the only one.
David, it's generally known that those first jobs out of MBA programs don't last all that long. I don't know. I think I've seen data that says it's like 2.5, 3 years, your first job, and then you move on to something else. Why is that?
I think a lot of students, and that's probably right, 2.5 or 3 years. I mean, I think a lot of students, you know, and as they get into their first job, a lot of them are using that first job as a stepping stone for something else. So I think whether it's consulting, you know, I think it's a great training for other paths. I was a banker for years, but a lot of people go into banking for just a very short period of time, and then they'll go into an industry or to, you know, to a client very typically, where they'll go to the buy side if they're interested in investing. So I think a lot of students are, you know, they're looking at that first job, and they maybe have that goal in mind of where they ultimately want to be, but they want to gain some more skills post MBA to then, you know, help them eventually reach sort of the end goal.
Yeah, right. Now, Maggie, you're our executive coach here. So you help people through lots of different career challenges. And I'm sure that one of your goals now is to help people decide what are they best fit for. We talked a little bit earlier about some of that. Knowing oneself is a starting point. But that's kind of vague. Like, how do you really know what you're fit for when you enter an MBA program? And how do you help people along that path to find the spot where they really can do their best?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us probably have similar orientations and onboarding programs. You know, there's a lot, we do a lot of design your life work, really getting them to think big about what they want to do. We utilize assessments, but more than the very traditional career counseling tools that we use, we also want to expose them to as many different opportunities and industries and functions as possible. So really early on in orientation, and again, I'm sure these other panelists do something similar, we bring alumni in who represent dozens of different functions and have students listen to panels about what a day in a life is in each of these different roles. We want to introduce them to that as early as possible, and then we encourage them to spend that first half of the term picking, okay, what were the 3 or 4 that resonated most? Now talk to more people in those roles. Go to those info sessions. You know, really, how can we expose them to as much of that as possible? And it really comes a lot from networking.
Right. Yeah, totally. And that's something that people pre-MBA generally don't do very well. And it's one of the skills, hopefully, that they acquire in an MBA program, because obviously that's a skill that is a lifelong skill to help you over the course of your entire professional career. How do you get people to get networking, Stephanie? Because I also think it's, maybe this is me, but I think networking is more of an American thing. Like I think a lot of other cultures where you're not to be as forward as you might be in our culture in the United States, might find networking more difficult. So how do you train people to be good networkers?
Yeah, it's really, it does feel very much like an American thing. And so we do extra support for our international students. But we do a combination of what might be a traditional classroom training workshop and a lot of in-person practice. But I think one of the ways to break out of that traditional networking is icky, and it's not really, for me, is really to think about it as being curious about people, understanding what different individuals do all day, really getting a sense of what skills they value at their companies or within that career path. And I think if you really shift gears and focus on more about building a community of people that you like to talk to, as opposed to talking to someone to get ahead, it really shifts your mindset and your engagement with individuals through the whole process. And it starts feeling like a fun socializing activity as opposed to something you have to do to find a job.
Eric, do you have students practice networking with fellow students?
We do a number of things, especially with our international students, where this could be a very different experience. We have some very set programs where, okay, now you have to go up in twos and go up and talk to other people in groups of two. And then you add a third person, and we make it fun, and we turn it into a happy hour, which can be a new experience as well. So we do some of that. And then again, a lot of our employer presentations may also then include a networking time afterwards. And so people learn pretty quickly how to do it. And we do some mock practicing do's and don'ts, and don't hog the whole conversation and move aside, invite other people in. And again, to make it as authentic as possible. It's not to check a box. It's not to try to, roadshow or grandstand or ball hog. It's to build relationships. And so hopefully we're shifting the mindset from it's a fake transactional requirement to it's a keen interest in, getting to know people, building relationships and friendships. And it's not a one-time thing. This should be going on, as you said, for the rest of your career.
Yeah, exactly. Before we were talking a little bit about trends, and one thing that didn't come out, but I think that is undeniably a major trend, is this generation seems to want jobs that have purpose, that end up, performing some sort of valuable function in one way or the other in society. It doesn't have to be social enterprise or nonprofit or a job like that, but more people seem to be interested in working for companies that do some sort of social good that goes beyond making money. David, have you seen that trend? And if so, how does it affect people who are attracted to finance?
I have seen the trend. I think and in finance in particular, I've seen it sort of go hand in hand with people really wanting to get comfortable with the company and the firm that they're going to also. So it's, and I've seen people, and sometimes companies struggle with this where, a candidate that they want will pick another firm, maybe not as high a ranked firm or not as a prestigious firm, because the student felt comfortable going to that firm or felt that there were greater opportunities. So, I think that students are doing more research on all aspects of a firm, not just the actual group that they're going to. So whether it's, their sustainability efforts or their, some of the big banks have impact investing arms. And so they're doing a lot more research on that front. But I think students are doing so much more research on like finding the right fit for them. And I think in finance, that's how people are solving that problem.
Yeah, I'm sure the same is true at Chicago Booth, right? Where, obviously finance is a very big area for your graduates.
Well, obviously finance is one area that students are going into, but I think one of the things that we've seen is my entire family might join this webinar, and I apologize.
That's quite all right. We'll talk to them too.
But I think one of the exciting things that we've seen is enthusiasm for students in the impact investing space, which I believe was mentioned earlier. We are also seeing students looking for ways to help in the current crisis, either as in terms of volunteer work or getting involved in local projects. Gun violence is obviously an issue in the south side of Chicago and something many of our students are passionate about. And so we have groups within the institution that help connect students outside of their professional lives to different projects, programs, or even initiatives to help them find outlets for those social interests.
Right. Let's go to the questions, because there are a bunch of them and they're piling up, and I think some of them are quite interesting. So here's a question from Marcos. Can you explain if there is a trend in most companies to recruit MBA graduates who are younger? This person observes that the average age of cohorts in different class profiles seems to be getting a bit younger, and wonders if in fact that's a function of job market demand. Anyone want to take that? I mean, I do not see that trend. Maybe someone else does.
I was going to say, we have not heard that from companies. I mean, if anything, in hearing the question, it almost sounds like that's more of an admissions or student prospective student-driven issue than anything else. But I have not heard any company in any industry looking for younger MBA students.
No, and we actually haven't seen a shift in our admissions either. It's usually around 4 to 5 years is the average years of experience coming in. But yeah, the companies want MBAs with experience. In some of our specialty master's programs, it absolutely has been skewing younger, and companies want that, but not from what we've seen in the MBA.
Right.
Yeah, I would just add, some employers have these terrific leadership development programs as a great entry point. But again, they want a set number of years. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're a great candidate, but come back with 2 more years and we'll talk to you. So in consulting firms as well. And some of the tech firms, you have to have some minimums. So I think the appetite from students might be younger, but the firms still want older.
How much difficulty is it for an H-1B visa to be had these days by an international student? And are there special kinds of support that you provide internationals? Because if they want to work in the United States, it could be a more difficult search. Stephanie?
The visa situation is a bit suboptimal in the United States right now. One of the things that we do at Booth is try to look really closely at different industries and functions and help students get an idea of what their priorities are and then which career paths are the best for them to pursue. For example, if a student is incredibly interested in investment management, we can help them understand what are the companies which have a track record of hiring international students in the US. But because we actually have a global employer relations team that works with companies all over the world, we also encourage those students to do kind of a parallel search where they're engaging with companies in their home countries as well as in the US to navigate their strategy, and we'll help them connect with those companies outside of the US.
Yeah, I think STEM programs, STEM designation of MBA tracks or full MBA programs have helped somewhat, I imagine, right? Yeah.
They have. We'll see some companies are open to sponsoring people who have the STEM designation, which has been really, really a positive development. And so we're continuing to talk to companies about their receptivity there.
So one person, Kevin, asked this question. Please talk a little bit about students pursuing careers at early stage startups. What kind of internships do they typically pursue? Eric, you want to take that?
Sure. If you think about a startup, they generally need probably 2 things, and I'll pick a tech startup here. They need coders, so they need some tech people to build the product. And then they usually need some people in sales or marketing to get eyeballs on that product or whatnot. So they don't need a whole lot of strategy people because the founders and their board are leading that, and they're not big enough for a full corporate finance team. And so it's much more of, wearing a lot of hats, being versatile, a general management kind of person who can dive in, figure things out, uncharted water, dealing with ambiguity, making things happen without a whole lot of guidance and direction. And so I actually encourage that. If you've worked corporate in consulting or banking or somewhere, take the summer and go do your internship in a startup, and you will be startled by what you don't know or don't know what to do. So I think that's a beautiful way to jump into that. And hopefully we'll see some of that. There's a lot of needs with startups right now in this environment that are figuring out, do we sink or swim? And so we have a lot of our folks going into our venture lab at Georgetown and working side by side with some of these startups there. So all for it. It's going to be a very different feel if you like order and structure. But yeah, it's great, and you can tell great stories about it when you're interviewing post MBA.
Yeah, startups can be messy. Very.
Well, and I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to chime in. I think too, we encourage our students, if they have that interest, to definitely do the internship. I think sometimes students forget that your internship is also your time to try the thing that might be scary. It doesn't necessarily have to be that stepping stone to the full time. It's your chance to experiment. So we actually partner with, I know a lot of large cities have a startup week, like an official startup week. And so we partner with the Twin Cities Startup Week and host the career fair there on campus. early on in October in the fall, so students can at least get familiar with some opportunities. So it feels just as legitimate as, you know, potentially that very traditional opportunity as well. So they're a little bit more confident to try.
Yeah, good.
We do something quite similar, and we've also begun to run a program before students officially matriculate, where some of our alumni will have students or incoming students spend 4 to 6 weeks with them over the summer, getting a feel for what a startup looks like, so that you don't have to find time either while you're in the program, squeezing in part-time and project work, or taking an internship and then realizing, oh my goodness, a startup is certainly not for me. And we've really appreciated the students having those opportunities as well.
Now, here's a question for Stephanie.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Oh, she's anticipating something here. And actually, David, you'd be a good person to talk about this as well, given your background in finance. For someone who isn't coming in with IB experience, but looking to do PE post-Booth, what have successful students who've gotten a PE job after going to Booth done? How do you prepare yourself for making a switch like that if you don't have, obviously, PE experience or IB experience, which immediately puts the odds against you?
Absolutely, but not in an insurmountable way. I think going back to one of our earlier conversations, this is definitely an example of an industry where you really need to own your search. No one's going to do it for you. So there's a few key pieces of this. One is truly building up your modeling skill set, really being able to handle all the technical aspects of the job. Obviously, investment bankers are experts at that. The other piece is building out a network. And finally, at Booth, and I imagine other schools offer this as well, we have an experiential learning program where students can intern kind of as a part-time during the school year and take a course on private equity and work at a firm to get some initial experience. Overall, I think it's not an easy shift to make. We certainly see students do it. And by and large, in this market, it's kind of uncertain. I think the other piece to think about is the different stages and roles within private equity. So we're seeing growth in portfolio companies and students going into those roles. How do I do operations and management within a portfolio company? We also see venture capital firms looking for students who are deep experts in a particular area. You have a PhD in microbiology. You can add value here in a very unique way. So thinking about your broad set of skills might help you narrow that down, how you go about it as well.
David, do you have any advice for someone who doesn't have PE experience or investment banking experience and wants a post-MBA job in private equity?
Yeah, sure. I feel like I get this question a lot. So, you know, I think I agree with what Stephanie said. I think it's a lot of networking. I think you also have to be creative. I mean, I think if you don't have experience in that area or banking, you know, the odds of getting a job at KKR, Blackstone, or Apollo is probably pretty slim, but there, you know, maybe regional firms or middle market firms where you may find some alumni that may be willing to take a chance, particularly for an internship. Timing can also be really hard too, because some of those banking offers may come a lot earlier than the PE offers. So you have to decide, you know, how much you really want it. But then, you know, I often see a lot of students that just don't have that background. They will decide to go into banking and then look to make that, you know, try to continue the networking over the next, you know, first year or two out of school and make the transition after that.
Yeah, right. Now, Maggie, this question seems destined to be your question. The writer says that in an earlier panel, admissions staff said, don't see a career as a series of jobs. Think of what problems you want to solve in the next 10 years. So this person's saying, let's say I'm working at Procter & Gamble and I make the company sell 2% more in shampoo. What problem am I solving? So I think really the nature of the comment that was made earlier was instead of just going into a job, think about a longer term perspective on how you want to spend your next 10 years, which seems to me a very valuable way to think about it. Maggie?
I think it's a valuable way to think about it. I also think it's a lot to put on an incoming student to know what they want. Frankly, I mean, to know what you want to do in 10 years. I always tell students, follow your curiosity. So what are you curious about? What are you interested in and what are you curious about? And that is the problem we want to solve. So if you have been selling shampoo, right, and figuring that, you must be curious about what interests consumers, right? What are trends in consumers and how do you get inside a consumer's head to lead to more sales, right? Like maybe that's what you're interested in. But I tell people to follow what you're curious about. I don't know, maybe this is not popular on the panel, but I think it's really hard to ask students to know what they want to do for the next 10 years. And frankly, when we tell students to figure that out, sometimes it ends up paralyzing their decision making because they feel like any step they make can be a wrong step. So what are you curious and interested in about right now? Who have you talked to that their job sounds really interesting and you would want to learn more and you find it engaging? Follow that thread. So I don't know if I'm fully answering it, but that's just my opinion.
No, I think that's right. And let's face it, despite what many applicants tell admissions, many of them are quite uncertain about what they want to do with the MBA. I mean, Eric, if you had to guess, what percentage of students come in knowing exactly what job they want? How many? What percentage? Is it 50? Is it less?
I think it's I would say 25% know exactly what they want and the path to go there and the motivation to go there and all of that. There are a bunch of people who are like, well, a couple of different things, but again, you land and then you get consumed by everything. This is an MBA crucible that by design is really hot and very intense, and you don't have a lot of time to dream and imagine and whatnot. So again, I guess we encourage you to figure that out while you're applying and be as genuine and thoughtful in your application. Try not to just say what you think we want to hear. Who are you? What are your passions? Put that out there and then continue to develop that. What makes you curious? What problems are you trying to solve? And I think that's maybe why people are leaving between 2 and 3 years after their MBA, because they thought they knew what they wanted or they were chasing the herd or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, so the imagination gets sparked or life happens or, people move around and get married and whatever. So, the other passion, I guess, point I'll make is that so many people know exactly what they want, and then that closes down all these other opportunities that are out there. And right. And it's like, if I don't graduate with this job, then the ROI and the whole experience has been a failure. And it's like, no. This is the first about 5 steps. It's going to take 5 steps for you to get to where you want. So let's take the first 2 or 3 over the next 2 or 3 years, and then get you to launch into that. So you're right. We're playing with a lot of different hopes and dreams and expectations. And again, the degree, I think itself is very versatile. And hopefully our people are flexible and we come alongside them and hopefully open up their imaginations.
Now, are any of you ever called upon by the admissions staff to render a verdict as to whether or not you think you're confident you can get this person the job that they want when they cite their post-MBA goal? Or is that something that admissions keeps quiet and they don't really come to you with? Anybody?
So I interview a lot of students, and I do get a lot of admissions will send me a number of applications just to see how realistic someone's expectations are. It's often hard. I would rather do the interview. It's hard just looking at a resume and an application to tell if someone's going to be successful. So I'd rather actually ask the person. I think in the course of an interview, you can start to get a pretty good sense of, and maybe it's not exactly a certain career path, but you at least get a good sense, like, are they going to be successful? I can usually figure that out, but I don't know, just looking at an application, it's awfully hard.
Yeah, I would think so. Although you do look for things that are non-linear as sign of red flags, right? I mean, if someone, just to use the PE example, if you never have worked in PE, if you haven't worked in investment banking and you will suddenly have a desire to work in private equity, the immediate suspicion is, okay, this person just wants to make a lot of money.
True. Or that's probably one of their main goals, at least.
Yeah, of course. Right, exactly. Which is difficult sometimes. Here's an interesting question, and it's about how does your office help a candidate who wants to be an entrepreneur, particularly in the social impact nonprofit space? Or is that something really reserved for, the Center of Entrepreneurship or the Center for Social Enterprise and given faculty who might serve as mentors to students, since it's not really a traditional MBA mainstream career? How do you handle folks like that, Stephanie?
Yeah, I mean, so we do a lot in partnership with the Social Enterprise Center. One of the biggest pieces of value we can provide on a one-on-one coaching perspective is really to help a student wrap their arms around, is this right for me? And beyond that, there are a variety of things that we'll do. We'll run panels with the center to help bring in entrepreneurs. We will include some of the social entrepreneurs in our startup networking events, which for a student who wants to be an entrepreneur, it's a great opportunity just to understand how other people are running their businesses. And then we continue to support those students throughout whatever their coaching needs might be, but they'll also be working closely with our social venture challenge and other programs within the university.
Right. And Eric, you should know that this person says, I love the name and the idea behind Bark Tank.
Yeah, well, Bark Tank is a play on Shark Tank, of course. Our mascot at Georgetown is a bulldog, and so we call it Bark Tank, and we give away money, thankfully, through a generous grant from one of our alumni. And that's, again, it's an integrative experience. It's not just the center, it's just not social impact, it's not just entrepreneurship. We have an MBA club that is net impact for MBA and then net impact for entrepreneurship. They both work with the centers. We have these case competitions, we have pitch competitions, we have VCIC, we have all these things that it's a community. It's a big community together. And in some cases involving the undergraduate students and other graduate students. And so it's a real ecosystem. And it's all got to work together because some of these things are tough to get into, or there are very few roles for very popular destinations. So it's a team effort.
Do alumni get actively involved in helping ventures get partnerships and funding? That's a follow-up question to you, Eric.
Repeat the first part of that question.
Sure. Do alumni actively get involved in helping ventures get partnerships and funding through both tanks?
Well, for that's through our Ted Leonsis Family Foundation, where we got that. Who's an alum? He's also part of a whole network. We have different advisory boards for the Entrepreneurship Initiative. We also have a whole team of over 20 entrepreneurs in residence, and so these are former founders or venture capitalists or alumni or business owners who, again, are either seed funding or contributing or making introductions. So again, it's that whole team effort.
Another question, for students looking to break into real estate development, what kinds of companies have any of you seen hire from your schools? Tishman, Spire, Brookfield, Hines, for example. David?
I've seen Hines. I don't have all the names to rattle off the top of my head. Brookfield, we've had some interns and students go there. I think, sort of similar to the PE question, I think for students pursuing real estate, it's a lot of, entrepreneurial networking. We have a real estate club that partners. There's a real estate master's program at Cornell outside of the business school. But those students in that program and the business school sort of partner for a real estate club, and there are a lot of speakers and conferences that they put on. So, I encourage students looking in real estate to, sort of go out and network and take advantage of, resources across the university.
Yeah, and real estate is a good field, to do your research, because there are some programs that have a center for real estate, and they have a set number of faculty who specialize in the area. And, obviously real estate is not necessarily a hot, popular area in most B schools. It amounts to 2-3% of the class at most schools, not much more. At Chicago Booth, is there much interest in real estate? You have, of course, some of the most famous real estate developers in America in your metro area.
Sure. So folks like Sam Zell are certainly connected to the Booth community. So we have a person on the employer team who does outreach specifically within the real estate space. And so the names that you rattled off are those are all companies that post roles with us, and our students have the opportunity to apply to those jobs. We also have faculty members who are engaged in the area. In general, it is a small piece of our student population that goes into real estate ultimately, but they're a very dedicated group, and many of them are looking at things like real estate investing. Our alumni community is also heavily engaged. They run an annual conference, which is a great opportunity for our students to plug into the broader community.
Yeah, good point. Another question here. How much of a factor is prior work experience when targeting popular roles at MBB or IB? Maggie?
I mean, prior work experience is important. More than that is the story you're going to tell about that experience and why you want to do this, and then how do you solve problems, and showing that through your case interview. But I think you owning your story and knowing why you're sitting in front of them and how that got you there is more important than it being any prescriptive type of experience. With consulting, I think you know, there's not a right or wrong path. That's what makes it so interesting, right? Because they need all different types of experiences to solve these problems and come in and strategize. They just want to know that you can communicate it and you have a firm grasp on that story.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. And David, I'm sure that you have seen in finance, finance is open to former consultants. Finance is open to anyone who really wants to work hard and dig in and do the work.
Yeah, I'm always surprised at some of the backgrounds of people that end up being the most successful recruiters in banking in particular. I mean, I've seen, you know, I often talk about, like, we had a winemaker who ended up being one of the most sought after candidates a couple of years ago. I've had people from the Peace Corps. I mean, I think a lot of it, to Maggie's point, is the story you tell as to, you know, not necessarily the brand that's on your resume, but the story and the skills that you've developed, and then your dedication.
Yeah, that's really true.
It's often how interesting are you, right? Like, it's often the most interesting experiences that are the most sought after.
Right. In banking, are you the person that someone else wants to work with 18 hours a day? So, you know.
Right. And in consulting, are you the one you want to be stuck in an airport with for 2-3 hours waiting for that next flight, right?
Exactly.
Okay, I want each of you to tell me a story. Tell me a story about one student, could be this current year in this environment, could be the previous year, that you helped support and put into their dream job. Stephanie?
Yeah, I don't do a ton of student-facing work, but one of the most meaningful experiences I had a student come in a couple years ago who was very committed to moving back to New York. Her father had passed away. Her mother lived in the area. And she wanted to work in investment management, and she knew she had to be in New York, and she had been just stressing herself out networking with everybody she could find. And I mentioned to her, have you thought about PIMCO? And she said, no, they're only in California. I said, no, they've got an office in Midtown Manhattan. You should look at it. Later that year, she came back to me and told me, I found the perfect job. This is exactly what I want to do. And a year and a half later, when she graduated, she just came into my office with tears in her eyes. And she's like, if you had never suggested that, I would not have even known it was there. And everything's coming together. And just seeing how much that shifted her perspective and the load it took off of her was really amazing. And I'm really grateful for that experience.
Plus PIMCO, that's a good job.
Excellent job.
Eric, you have a story?
Sure. I have a student who came from the West Coast of the United States and had spent his entire life out there, switched environments to get the MBA at Georgetown on the East Coast, just to get a different feel, with all the intent of going back to the West Coast. And his background, he was a writer and a surfer.
Oh my God.
So Maggie would love that. And I had to work with that to craft a story. And ended up in a business development role at a tech company back in San Francisco. So, you know, as we looked to make these shifts, he stayed on the West Coast, but did his internship there, but in tech and in business development. Well, meanwhile, he converted that to a full-time role, but had fallen in love with a fellow classmate. And the fellow classmate was going to New York. And so they're both at tech firms in New York, and they're getting married this weekend, virtually, I think. I don't know. but it's what the MBA will do. You can switch coasts, you can find your life partner, you can become a writer and a surfer and then go off and do tech. It's again, it's a beautiful thing.
I love that. Maggie, you have a favorite story?
There's so many. I was racking my brain, like, which one do I want to tell?
Yeah.
Like Stephanie, I mean, I definitely do a piece of coaching, but managing the team, I don't get quite as close to the students. But I do have one that comes to mind. It's from about 2 years ago. And this is an international student, and he had a tech background. So he was a software engineer. And he came and he was so happy. He was from India. He was so happy to be in the US. His favorite show was Friends. And he had watched every episode 6 times, apparently, so he could quote the whole thing. And he was really hoping that like every coffee shop was like Central Perk, right? Anyway, he had a great internship, but it didn't yield. It was not pipeline, so it was with a logistics company. It was great, but it wasn't a pipeline internship. So he had to go through full-time recruiting. And as an international student, you know, sometimes there's not as many that are open. He went through full-time on-campus recruiting, didn't yield anything then. And as you know, the ones that you work the hardest with that end up taking the longest time, right? Those are the ones you really get to know. Anyway, it ended up being the day before graduation, he got an offer in product management at Target. Was just so over the moon because he thought he had to write off kind of these traditional on-campus recruiting roles, and he ended up landing it through amazing networking. And he now 2 years later is one of our most dedicated international student alum, and he coaches the students on the power of networking and how important it is, particularly for an international student. And you know, he's probably one of my favorites because we really did work together the full 2 years. You know, the students that land it really fast, you don't necessarily get to work with them the whole 2 years.
That's true. That's fantastic. David, last
I'll be quick just in the interest of time, but it's, you know, working with an international student this year that really wanted to be a banker, started even before arriving at school. So, you know, through the summer, getting prepped, got to our interview week, and unfortunately didn't end up with anything, but just kept pounding the pavement and kept networking. And 2 months later, very happy to say got a job at a very prestigious boutique bank. So, you know, it paid off. Like she just kept going, and so very happy for her.
all great, all inspiring stories to motivate a whole new generation of people who will be under your care soon, I think. So listen, thank you so much for your time and your perspectives. Stay safe and healthy. This goes to your families, including your little one, Stephanie, who poked in at one point. Really appreciate it. Stephanie, Eric, Maggie, and David, thank you. And for all of you out there, if you want to have a little one-on-one chat with any one of our panelists, you're welcome to do so. There will be chat rooms that are accessible through our Whova application. So join them there. It's been a long day. We've had a lot of sessions. We have had great questions, so I really want to thank you for that. And thanks for watching. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants at CentreCourt. See you soon. Good luck on your MBA journey. Bye, everybody.